Humanity Matters. Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, along with my co-host, Sami. My name is Carin, and this podcast is a production of the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. And on today's episode of It's All About the Children, we have a guest whose journey extends far beyond a title or a crown. Melanie Shiraz is a data scientist, entrepreneur, advocate, and the reigning Miss Israel. She's used her platform to speak about identity, leadership, resilience, and the importance of standing proudly in who you are. Now, I'm going to have my co-host, Sami, introduce you again, because if not for Sami, you wouldn't even be able to come here today, right? And you take it away, Sami.
Okay. Well, to the audience, welcome, and we have a very, very special guest, okay, Miss Israel.
All right.
And she is a celebrity, obviously, and especially young people, okay, are celebrity, starstruck. So I'm sure that they will have a wonderful, wonderful time with you. We met at the convention of Stand With Us in Las Vegas, and you impressed me, and I felt and feel that it's very important for you to join us and to speak to the young people. The first question that I'm having is, how long will you be the reigning Miss Israel? What does it mean to you? And how do you intend or do to make this world a better one? Because there is too much hate in this world. So I'm leaving it up to you to introduce yourself and say whatever you want. And after that, I'll give the opportunity to Carin to ask you questions, because she has questions for you.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure. And it's great to see you again, Sami. I think a lot of people, well, actually, nobody knows this, but I met Sami the first time 10 years ago almost in Berkeley, or when I was studying at Berkeley. I went to the APAC conference, and there he was, and he left an impression on me. And I remembered him 10 years later when I saw him again at the Stand With Us conference. So it's a very full circle. And yeah, that's a great question. I think that, first of all, my title is really like getting to its end right now. It's been a very very challenging but also very rewarding year for me. And I think that some of the biggest takeaways that I have learned from this time, especially having just come back from a tour where I was visiting campuses and talking to a lot of students and people who have differing opinions to mine, I think a lot of people get lost in the black and whiteism of narratives. And I think that people like to really reduce things to a form or a format that's very simple to contain and to understand. And I think that therein lies the problem, because in the end of the day, there's no 100% black, 100% white, 100% good, 100% evil. Everything is a lot more complex than that. And I think that when we really recognize this, we start to see one another as humans. Because when we don't recognize this and we reduce people to just good or bad, right or wrong, we lose our ability to see the humanity in others. And that's when I think the conversation kind of dies. And so for me, I've always been, trying, even during my time at Berkeley, to engage with people and to hear other people's opinions, and never to come from a position of judgment, but rather from one that seeks enlightenment. And I hope that I can continue doing that.
Thank you so much for taking time to be here. I think your message is a very important one. And I think that, the thing that Sami and I talk about a lot is how all of us as adults, have a story of our own that we kind of bring to today from maybe childhood. And one of the things that, as I have noticed as an educator, and something that maybe you could talk to, is that children are searching a lot to kind of feel accepted and valued, right? And like you talked about, like good and bad, it's almost like we have these buckets today that people are looking to kind of like get into, right? Or like fill a spot. So how would you, or what do you think helped you develop a strong sense of your identity? And why is it important for children to understand like who they are, where they came from, and maybe to kind of like add to it, just like what are educators or parents able to do to help their children feel proud, or maybe you can talk a little bit to that.
So the first thing that comes to mind is that I feel extremely lucky to have been born in Israel. I think from day one of being on this planet, I was instilled with such resilience and pride in who I am and where I come from, and that Israeli identity is what has always stayed with me. Even when I was living in the diaspora, even when I was, doing things that were not in this space of advocating for Israel, for the Jewish people, but especially in times where I feel like my identity has been challenged, like when I was at Berkeley and I was faced with Palestinian flags back in 2016, or even now as Miss Israel, where like my role is to represent my country and face an insane amount of hate. I feel like I've realized that when you have that sense of pride, it really strengthens your backbone, if that makes sense. And I think it's because you're able to tap into almost this like collective strength. And that's one of the things that made me feel really resilient despite everything that I dealt with at Miss Universe, because that was a very, very challenging period of time. And I was receiving hundreds of millions of views, and a lot of them came from, Arab media or from anti-Israel media, and it was a lot to deal with. And I think that seeing myself as a representative of and as part of a collective made me feel so much more strong and resilient, like I was saying. And I think this is true not just for people that are in these crazy situations like I've been. It's true in the day to day. When I was at Berkeley, I felt very isolated when I first got there until I found my Chabad, my Jewish organizations on campus, until I found my community. And then I really felt, like I said, like I could just tap into this community and that they would give me so much strength. So I think that pride plays a really, really important role. And I think that also the stronger your sense of identity and pride and community is, the more difficult it is to be swayed into a society that wants to put you into a bucket. Because we see that happening, especially now, even in young, in the schools and in places where young children are like very influenceable. And I think when kids don't know who they are, that's when they fall prey to kind of doing anything possible to fit in, even if it means abandoning their own sense of self and their own sense of morals and values. And so I think that for parents, it's really, really critical, whether they're Jewish or Israeli or Muslim or Christian or whoever they are, wherever they're from, it's really, really important to make your child feel proud to be who they are.
Melanie, a question, okay, you probably said it, but number one, where is your family from originally? And your English is perfect. Where did you learn it? Okay? Because it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so we moved to US when I was in school as a child. And I think I've lived probably 50-50 between here in Israel and in the US. So I would say that's why I have such good English. I also did my two grad degrees in English, so that helps for sure. And in terms of my background, we're very, very mixed. I think that's really cool now that I'm representing Israel to say that I'm equal parts Sephardic, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, like I'm just everything. And it's interesting because I can kind of relate and like resonate with a lot of people in Israel and in the Jewish community in general. So it's interesting, yeah.
And can you tell us about your culture? Because it's different, like you mentioned, Ashkenazim, Sfaradim, Mizrahim, from Africa. Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about your culture and what you like about it?
Yeah, so I think because I'm so mixed, I don't have like one specific thread, I'm not I don't identify as like one specific like sect of Jewish ethnicity, and for that reason, I think I've grown up very Israeli. Like like you just have such diverse experience living here in Israel. You can be Ashkenazi and make Moroccan fish for Shabbat dinner, and like it's a very normal thing. So I think that that's been pretty much my upbringing, and it's really interesting because every time I travel back and forth, I realize like how different Israeli culture is from American culture, and sometimes I have a little bit of culture shock when I go back to the US. But um, I think Israel, with all of its diversification and different cultures and backgrounds, and even people have like the stereotype of Israelis like beeping at one another and yelling at one another. I think that it's because we have this like uh, smaller degree of separation between one another that people in places like in the rest of the world do. And so I think it kind of makes us like this like big family that's very like overly comfortable with one another. And I think that that's how I relate to people now in general all over the world. And sometimes people say I'm too direct or like too transparent or like too trusting of people. But I think that that's what makes Israel beautiful.
Carin?
No, I think there's an understanding. It's true. My father's Israeli.
You wouldn't yell at a stranger in the US. And it's funny because like you shouldn't yell at a stranger, but also like when you feel like everybody's family, you just kind of like give yourself a little bit.
You act like yourself. Exactly. Right.
So, Melanie, I think you remember, but one of the things that I like to elevate people, okay, to become leaders. And since I served in the IDF and the Israeli Air Force, at the end of my presentations, I salute, as a veteran, okay, the future leaders of our country, of Israel, United States, and everybody else. So this is my way of elevating them. Carin?
Melanie was giving an example of the mixed cultures, and the example she shared was being Ashkenazi but making Moroccan fish for Friday night Shabbat dinner, which is something that I do, but Sami won't eat the fish. Okay, no matter what. I've tried. I've asked him multiple times. He won't try the fish. Maybe if Melanie comes, you'll try the fish.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we might have to have you for a Shabbat dinner.
As long as it's fried or baked.
I think it's beautiful because even if you are, for example, even if you're a 100% Moroccan Jew living in Israel, or you have like a very clear sense of ethnicity or background or culture in your house, you have so much influence from all of the melting pot that is Israel and the Jewish people. And I think that that's something that's really beautiful because I don't see that level of heterogeneity. Is that the word? In the rest of the world, like people, there's like a lot of, there's a lot of like diverse culture in a lot of the world, but I don't feel like they really mesh. Like they just seamlessly integrate with one another. And so I think that that's something that's really special to me.
I just want to talk to what you said for a moment because I have family that's in Haifa, and we were there for a holiday season, and they brought us into like the middle of the square. And there they celebrated, there was a big, Christmas tree, and there were lights. And I guess recognizing the three holidays that, bring light during the winter months, if you will, being in the middle of Haifa, and everybody, like you said, is just kind of mixing, and you don't feel any difference. It's like go to an Arab village. You don't feel different when you're in Israel and you're going to an Arab village to go eat hummus because it's the best hummus you're going to get, and growing up here in Queens, I really felt so lucky because it is so diverse and you have so much exposure to all these things. But one thing that you said that I don't find is happening, especially today, is this meshing of. It's almost like people want to be above or like feel like, where is my place? Nobody's taking anybody's place away. There's place for everybody. There's space for everybody to coexist and to get along so nicely. I don't know. It would be nice if we saw a little bit more. I did want to ask you a question a little bit about social media, if it's okay, because I know that that's an area where a lot of children now spend a lot of time. I know that we have to become more well-versed in that front. I know that I've heard it being called the eighth front now, and that's a way that young people can utilize, and even older people now, this space. So I'm just curious, and again, it might be like a 5-part question, but answer, what you feel like is most important to you, because I could ask 12-part questions. All right, so just what concerns you the most about that reality? And I use reality loosely, right? And what would you want young people to understand, about this concern on social media where people are kind of like, living in this world of like comparisons, right? And they're trying to like have more people like them or more followers, right? And how do you, as somebody who can be in that limelight, right? How do you kind of stay grounded and separate your values from like the public opinion? And like you said earlier, you got a lot of like really negative comments and things like that. Like, how do you push that away and really remember who you are and like what you have to give, and your gift?
So I think the last example that we were discussing is a really interesting segue into this question, because when I go to Israel, the example I gave you about diversity in Israel was about, like me as a Jew, how I feel about other Jewish ethnicities. But the reality is that 20% of Israel is not Jewish. It's other religions, and it's so diverse, and we all coexist. I'll go to the hospital and 50% chance my doctor is an Arab, and I'm completely fine with that because for me, it's normal in Israel. And I think that, we live in this ecosystem where we actually coexist with one another. And then when we go into the social media ecosystem, people once again resort to the first thing that I was saying, which is this black and whiteism and this desire or compulsive need to compartmentalize and shove everything in a very neat box, because it's the only way that people can really understand things today, because we're in a society or a day and age of information overload. So in the end, my answer would be the same to what I said about, raising kids. You need to know who you are in order to not allow yourself to be the victim of comparison, because the more you're sitting and comparing yourself to others, the more you're focusing on what others are doing rather than what you're doing, the more similar you become to others because you're trying to emulate them. And that's just a failing strategy, because if you are trying to replicate how somebody walks on their own path, you're inherently not going to be able to walk their path better than they are. The only path you can walk on and succeed walking on is your own. And that's something that keeps me grounded. And aside from that, something I want to say about social media today is that unfortunately, there is so much noise. There's so much hate and division. As a data scientist, I know why this happens. It's because it creates engagement. The algorithms are designed to create engagement because it creates clicks, which create profit. Now, in a society where we are living in this bubble where we are being profited off of when we are upset at something, of course, that's going to be the main thing that we see online. And I always try to encourage people to take a step away from that, because when you get to a place like that where things are quantifiable, like how many clicks something gets is a quantifiable metric, people will do things that are not necessarily in your best interest. They're not necessarily the truth. And there's a lot of entities that have been capitalizing on that and spreading propaganda via social media. And so, I think that's also an epidemic in and of itself, is young people right now relying on Instagram and TikTok for for news. Like, that's crazy. And I think that needs to stop. That standard needs to stop. But, I'm a little bit pessimistic that it will. I think it's only getting worse. And so in a day and age where the information overload is only getting worse, you really, really need to just know who you are and where you stand and to do your own thing.
Are there things that you think that people can be doing? Because this algorithm thing, for me is a really hard thing to understand. I'm not very well versed in that digital space. I'm a kindergarten teacher at heart, so I'm happy with markers and a big giant pad of paper any day of the week. But people are engaging. They're on their phone all the time, whether it's in a social media space or that they have, their phone and they're getting information being sent to them, right? Are there ways that we can, maybe some of your data background, like tips and tricks that we could use to try and help or move the algorithm? Because from what I heard, for every like one like pro-Israel or something that's in favor of like anything Israel, there's like 1 to like I think 50 something advertisements or, you know, posts or whatever it's called on like Free Palestine, if you will. So like, is there something we could do like to spread the message? I don't know. I mean,
If we're using this specific example of like being a Jew on the internet or being a pro-Israeli voice on the internet, what I said so far is like absolutely the piece of advice I will give, because this is a numbers game that we will never be able to win. And so if you are easily influenced by what you're consuming, you're going to end up falling prey to those tactics. And it's going to be it's going to create, if this is going to continue this way, it's going to create a very dire outcome, I think, for us as people, as Jews specifically. Unfortunately, what I've been noticing on social media happening today is I mean, I don't want to use the Holocaust as an example, but there's a lot of the same rhetoric repeating itself, and it's extremely concerning, because you know what comes after that. And that's why I'm so grateful and fierce in the appreciation I have for Israel, because imagine how scary reality would be today for Jewish people if we didn't have that. But in the same way that we have that, and we are able to lean into our collective voice for strength, I think that we need to do the same thing when it comes to having these difficult conversations online.
You asked a question of Melanie, and I want also to answer in that one.
of course.
The importance of words in images. And a lot of people do not really understand that. And words and images, they can inspire. Okay, and obviously this is what you are trying to do, what we are trying to do, to inspire the young people to become good people and to loving people, okay, less hate. But they can also hurt. At the same time, what's happening right now in the world, words and images can incite. And people use the freedom of speech, okay, as a platform to incite people to do harm. People also stereotype. In my particular case, my life was saved by a German woman. So, okay, not every German was a criminal, was a bad person. Words and images can promote hate. This is exactly what's happening today. They can lead to violence, and we have many examples of what's happening here right now. There were incidents in Israel, that somebody was killed, 4 people were injured and everything else. And this is going on and on. And the words and images are also the most powerful tool for propaganda, for brainwashing, okay, for indoctrination, which I don't know about Israel, but in the United States, there is no education, there is indoctrination. And for me, the most important thing which I want young people to understand, words cannot be retracted. They cannot be taken back. As much as you want to apologize, maybe they will forgive you. But what you said to hurt somebody, they will remember it. And that's what's very important. And I want the young people to understand, okay, what words and images can do or cannot do.
I think it's really, really important to encourage critical thinking now more than ever, because we grew up in societies where, for the most part, or in eras that, for the most part, if you wanted information, you would have to go out and seek it. You would have to go to a library, you would have to do a Google search. Now you just open up your Instagram or your TikTok, and there's information being forced into your face because there's a vested interest in you believing something. It's propaganda.
We're going to pick this up in part 2. We're just going to pause on the film, and I want to thank our guests. I want to thank you, Melanie Shiraz, our reigning Miss Israel. We'll be back for part 2. of It's All About the Children. And thank you for tuning in.